Welcome to the Sales Formula course. Today is the first session of this course. As per tradition, it's held in an open format. Today we'll discuss hiring the right employees who can sell effectively in 2021. Why would anyone need to learn sales? The thing is, I hope I'll manage to convince you that in today's world, sales have done a complete 180. Indeed, the way people buy today is vastly different from how they used to buy in the past, though some things remain similar. Furthermore, customers no longer want to receive cold calls. For instance, I don't respond to cold calls at all. In other words, I don't accept them. I think most people are like this. Implementing modern sales techniques is the only chance for your business to survive. And there's a lot to cover here. So now we're going to discuss this topic with you. So this course has its own website. This is what it looks like. You can read the description and familiarize yourself with the program. I'll tell you a bit about myself, as some of you might not know me, especially in the context of this course. My name is Mike Pritula. Here's a list of companies I've worked for. Interestingly, although I'm an HR professional by trade, I've been involved in sales. I'm still involved, and I think I'll continue to be in the future. Even during my internship at another bank before Alpha Bank, I worked in the corporate clients department, VIP client sector, where I was involved in sales. That was for about 9 months. Essentially, I was selling banking products to customers. Then I joined Alpha Bank as a salesperson, and for the first 3 months, I also sold banking products. Then I was called to HR to recruit and train similar salespeople. I did this successfully for a while, then I was promoted. I was already recruiting branch managers, department heads, and managers for new business directions. At that time, Alpha Bank was launching the Bankovo direction. I hired the first specialist in this field in Ukraine. His name is Ben Eugene. Then I had other positions where I recruited salespeople or was somehow close to sales teams. For example, at Wargaming, I worked with the division responsible for sales and marketing. Of course, at Wargaming, it's not the same kind of sales as business to business or business to consumer. It's actually a free-to-play model where people play first and only later get involved in some kind of payments. But that's still sales. Preplay also had an interesting sales scheme without direct sales. At D, there was a sales department that I worked closely with and helped recruit people to build it up. And of course, working in online education and creating my own academy is also connected to sales. It's working with sales. Every day people buy the product, and consequently, I'm also responsible for sales. That's a bit of background. So, as you can see, I'm not far from sales and closer than it might have seemed. In my work, I rely on global best practices. Yes, by the way, I want to say that in sales, if we're not talking about selling from the perspective of a sales manager to a buyer, but we're talking about sales management, there's a lot of people management in sales. I would even say that successful sales is more about how people are managed rather than how specific processes are structured. So people management is primary there. I want to add here, I also have experience that I haven't mentioned here because the company isn't well known. It was a fast-moving consumer goods company where I worked as a human resources manager, and I got acquainted with fast-moving consumer goods sales. I was recruiting for them. And I also saw how important the right system and proper management of salespeople are. Because even the most talented star sales representative, when placed in a department without a competent manager, couldn't work effectively. Conversely, where there's a great leader, even a less experienced employee can achieve very good results. That's how it is. If you don't mind, I would be grateful if you could share about yourself, your city, position, and company, so we can get to know each other. The same goes for those watching on Facebook. Please write in the comments there as well. I will read them out. Those who are already on the course, a diploma awaits you for successfully completing the course and all the homework assignments. So while studying the course, pay attention to the homework assignments. Our course program is quite extensive, consisting of 16 sessions. I would say the training program is quite versatile. Some people think that their sales in their particular segment are super unique. But the interesting thing is, the successful salespeople I have encountered, the successful sales managers I have met, they quite often changed industries. For example, IT companies nowadays really like people from the FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods business. It is considered that FMCG is one of the best sales schools overall. Some company sales managers actually come from other fields, having worked as engineers or led technical teams. Therefore, we cannot say that sales in one company are absolutely unique and not at all replicable in another company. There are common universal approaches that, when known, can lead to successful sales. And it does not matter whether you are just a salesperson, a manager, a director, or even the CEO of a company. Therefore, in my opinion, this course and this knowledge are quite universal and suitable for everyone from an ordinary salesperson. Understanding the whole system will allow them to sell more effectively in their position, to a company director, and even to someone who might not directly manage sales but is connected to them. Let us move on. Our lesson today will be structured as follows. We will discuss how modern sales differ from everything you have seen before, and we have too. How do the most successful companies sell, and what are the characteristics of successful sales? I will probably use the word salesman, but some people prefer sales representative. I think it sounds a bit more dignified than salesman, and how chat sales have replaced phone sales. So let us get started. So where shall we begin? The modern world has changed dramatically, and modern sales are truly very different. I think you, as consumers first and foremost, notice this in your own habits as well. In the past, to buy some appliance, we would go to a store, and we had little trust in online shops. We preferred to touch the appliance, order it right there, and understand that this store and this salesperson sold me this appliance and I will buy it. Nowadays, people very rarely, if we are talking about many people, very rarely go to a store for appliances. They browse websites, read reviews, and may not even see the appliance in person. Recently, it's already hard for me to remember when I last went somewhere to see a TV, washing machine, blender, or toaster in person. I choose online, but at most I might watch on YouTube how someone interacts with it to see how it works. We even buy without doing that? The world has also become global in this respect. Global companies, we buy a lot on Amazon, AliExpress, and other foreign online stores. These boundaries are becoming fewer and fewer. A large number of postal operators successfully deliver. Last week, I received a package from Carter's Children's Clothing. A package from Amazon is on its way now. I bought myself a book that's not available in electronic form, only in paper. The world has become global. There are no protected niches now. Any niche can be invaded by a new player, some giant like Amazon, for example. There were many unique sellers on Amazon who were quietly selling something there. Amazon selected the most interesting niches, released their own products in these niches, almost copies, and simply exploded these niches. But many do this. That is, there are no protected niches. According to statistics, every company today has twice as many competitors as it did 5 years ago. That's the kind of global competition we're facing. This can be equated to the fact that the average company's market share has halved, but the market itself has also grown. By the way, here are some interesting figures. Global international sales volumes. These are cross-border sales. They are growing and very rapidly. There was a decline after the 2008 crisis. If not for the crisis, they would be much higher now. But even after the crisis, we see further growth. Yes, the pandemic again caused some declines on average, but some niches, on the contrary, have grown. AliExpress, for instance, with their lower-end products, significantly increased their volume during the pandemic. Some recent Friday broke some crazy records, and this trend will continue. So let's acknowledge that modern sales are definitely not the same as those described in old books, textbooks, and courses. Modern sales are a bit different. Let's move on. How companies competed before, how they compete now, and how they will compete in the future. Once upon a time, there was a huge emphasis on marketing. Companies thought that if they hired a marketer, everything would be fine. If anyone has watched the series Mad Men, it's called Bezumtsi, Mad Men in Russian. It's about marketers in America, probably set in the late 60s. I don't remember how many years they cover. This is a classic example of how marketing was perceived. So a company would create some product. They would go to marketers and say, "We have a product. Help us sell it." And that was the principle they followed. Then sales were built on innovations. Companies were coming up with new innovations, something novel. For example, mobile phones grew on innovations for a very long time. Each new model was somehow cooler than the previous one, but this too came to an end. Mobile phones, by and large, haven't really changed much in the last 5 years. There's performance, maybe a slightly better screen or camera, but it's no longer innovation, it's just slight improvement. Then companies started to focus on organic growth, betting on sales and marketing that are better than their competitors. Companies want to grow rapidly, so they're looking for ways to create a machine that will ensure constant growth. There are terms like growth marketing, growth hacking, and so on, where a company is looking for some way, some opportunity to hack into marketing, hack into sales. A huge number of companies are attracting investments for sales. Startups are very popular right now. In fact, many startups wouldn't need investments if they weren't aiming to grow explosively in their market. What's a startup to do? They understand that there's a very short window of time before they're copied, and they need to capture the market within that short period. They attract investments to put into marketing and their team to capture the market. This is by and large the main essence of investments today. First of all, such huge investments aren't needed for development. It's difficult to hire enough people to burn through $50 million or $100 million. And it's hard to keep all these people busy with work. That's why marketing and sales are at the core. Let's move on. So, what's the number one task for any sales effort? It doesn't matter if it's business to consumer, business to business to government, or government to government. There are many types, but we're talking about sales in general now. It's, of course, scalable, predictable revenue growth. Basically, when any salesperson is hired, the plan is that they will bring in new revenue. When they hire anyone, they call them ropa in Russian, a term I don't like at all. I would say head of sales when hiring a sales department manager. This is, of course, the task of scalability, meaning that with their help, you can grow and expand more and more. It should be predictable so that you can forecast and build a model for revenue growth. This is the number one task for any sales effort. So, in principle, everything is obvious, everything is predictable, nothing supernatural. But it only seems that way because there are nuances beyond the implementation. So, let's move on. Today, there are 4 components for successful sales. This was developed by the best companies in the field of sales. Successful companies that have concluded that to build this very scalable and predictable revenue growth, you only need to meet 4 conditions. But it only seems simple. In reality, there's a huge amount of work behind it. First, you need to hire equally successful salespeople. Here's one line written: hire equally successful salespeople. But salespeople, that's a huge topic. In fact, you could probably devote an entire course just to salespeople. How to find them, how to select them, how to evaluate them, how to persuade them, how to negotiate, how to onboard them, how to retain them. So it's really a big topic. Let's assume that we've learned to solve this problem systematically. Relying on chance is not an option, and relying on mastered twerk is definitely not an option. That means you need to know how to build a system for hiring salespeople. Next, you need to know how to train salespeople. The idea of hiring pre-trained salespeople, even for all the money in the world, doesn't work because salespeople need to be trained. Every company has its own specifics, its own nuances. Even if it's a very similar field, there are still unique aspects. Next, the next point is to ensure salespeople follow the same sales process. This is also a challenging task because each company finds its own formula for sales. This formula is refined over time. Every business has its own little nuances. What works in one might not work in another. So the general scheme is the same, but its adaptation to a specific business is slightly different. This is essentially where the specifics of applying the knowledge from this course differ for various industries. Not that the model itself will be different. No, the model will be universal, but its adaptation will be slightly different. We will even see an example today with the profile of a successful salesperson. The approach to developing the profile is common for all, but the specific salesperson profile for each company will be unique. And finally, the 4th task, which is very important, is to provide salespeople with the same quantity and quality of leads. This actually is what is very important, providing leads. And to be honest, it might seem like it is not the most important aspect. The main thing is to build a great team, a team of cyborgs who sell, but in reality that is not the case. In fact, this is the fuel we throw onto the sales fire. If we have great salespeople, we hire well, train well, have a great process, but we supply them with poor material, then, as they say, garbage in, garbage out. What goes in is what comes out. Let us move on. Now in more detail. Hire equally successful salespeople. Indeed, the personality of the salesperson greatly influences, or rather, has a significant impact on sales success. There is a saying, you can't make giants out of midgets. If you hire the wrong people, it will be extremely difficult to turn these people into winners. Therefore, what is required of any company building sales is to learn how to predict the outcome. Today, I'll show you how this can be done. That's why, even on the point of hiring salespeople, I was saying that there's a lot of people management in sales. There's a lot of knowledge from HR because you need to properly set up people management processes. Therefore, for each company, it's possible and necessary to develop an individual profile of a successful salesperson. How do you do that? We'll talk about it now. And then each salesperson needs to be evaluated using the right methodology and graded. These are the components of this point. Next, what does it mean to train salespeople uniformly? To train salespeople on the specific journey a buyer goes through in this particular company. So, for example, the buyer's journey tool is universal for any business. It doesn't matter if it's selling hairnets in the market or selling, rockets that deliver satellites into Earth's orbit for different governments. There's still a customer journey. There are many interesting aspects. By the way, today we'll examine and get acquainted with a technology that, in my opinion, well characterizes modern sales, because modern selling is something very technological. Next, Salespeople need to be trained in the sales process. Sales has its own process and the ability to qualify customers. That is, the ability to understand what kind of customer is in front of you and how to behave with them. This includes investments, the right investment of time, and focusing on the right customers. Next, assessment is very important in training. Again, look, even training is built on certain rules that originate from HR and creating from them people that customers want to work with. This is also an important point, that modern salespeople are not just sales machines, but people that others want to work with. If a customer doesn't want to work with a salesperson, that salesperson won't sell much. Let's move on. What does it mean to get salespeople to follow the same sales process? It's about sales coaching. In general, you could say that sales coaching is the most powerful sales management tool. If this doesn't happen, sales will never be predictable and won't grow steadily. Proper coaching is the best sales motivator. And it's not about pointing out wrong ways of working. It's about finding some talent in everyone, developing which can lead to a boost or growth in sales. It's about searching for the skill that's currently missing for success. It's about coaching based on numbers. That's why companies specializing in sales analytics are becoming very popular. The same goes for Salesforce People AI, which allows analyzing a lot of information. Even just dashboards, all sorts of BI tools, they're implemented largely to collect the right numbers and coach based on those numbers. And it's also about motivation through competition and bonuses. Sales attracts people with certain personality types, character traits, and talents. And for them, this is an important element to drive them and help them win. Let's move on. What does it mean to provide salespeople with the same quantity and quality of leads? The world has changed. We've already discussed this, we've seen it. I think you can see it for yourself. Many habits are changing, especially in the area of shopping. They're changing too. People are looking for products online. The internet plays a huge role in sales. That is, any person for any product somehow looks online, compares. They might go to a dealership to look at a car, but then they'll go online, watch a video review of that car, compare models, features, and prices, and this applies to any product. People find products differently and study reviews. Bloggers? Yes. Many companies and brands are betting on working with popular bloggers because they know that many people will watch and listen to what bloggers are saying, and the bloggers' audience will simply trust their recommendations. Modern buyers can find the products they need when they want, with almost perfect information about the competitive landscape. This can happen at any time of the day, and they certainly don't lack information. Next, they Google, it's true. Yes, right now, Google any product and you will get a lot of information, price, description, reviews, testimonials. People read reviews. That is also true. And many companies, of course, take advantage of this. It is important to know about this too and understand what to do about it. People engage in dialogue with companies on social media. People now take the initiative themselves in terms of electronic communication. They need to get something in one form or another. For example, I quite often browse products on the Rosetka website, various ones, and I look at reviews and check the Q section where people ask questions. Does this oven have 4 glass panes or 3? And for this vacuum cleaner, which filters are compatible? Do these cartridges fit this printer or not? In other words, people want to ask companies questions. So this is about a different process of building customer attraction. Let me repeat, it does not matter where you are. Nowadays, I do not know what business you will not find on the internet, and apartments are being sold online through targeting on Facebook. Many products that you would not even expect, like some trees, are being sold to you on Facebook. And other things too. This is about the effective interaction between marketing and sales. These are the two things that are needed. Let us move on. How the most successful companies sell. So they used to talk a lot and still continue to talk about this so-called sales funnel. They say funnel, sales funnel, which is marketing, and the task of marketing is to attract customers. There are sales, and the task of sales is to convert people who have shown interest or paid attention into those who buy. And that is it. Next. Then there are customers. And any classic sales are built on the funnel principle. Throwing more people into the top of the funnel, converting people more aggressively, hiring aggressive salespeople, giving them super effective scripts that have been proven. Let them work, and by teaching how to handle objections, how to identify needs, press on pain points, offer solutions, and customers will buy. I won't say it doesn't work. The world is always divided. In any world, the past, present, and future exist simultaneously. Look, it's very simple. We live in a world where electric cars and hydrogen-powered cars are driving simultaneously. And of course, there are very few, but they do exist. Where cars with internal combustion engines are driving at the same time, where people are riding horses or camels simultaneously. There are countries or towns, small settlements, where people still harness horses and transport things. Although horses were harnessed 100 years ago, that is, the past, present, and future exist simultaneously in the world. In sales, there are also cold calls trying to squeeze the customer and make sales out of them. I still receive a huge number of cold spam emails about something I didn't sign up for. Here are some calls. Hello, we are organizing a conference. Effective leader, come to our conference. They call me, I didn't register. And so on. So this exists. You can't deny it. The question is, how effective is it? How do modern companies sell? The old concept of the funnel has been replaced by the concept of the flywheel in English. And now on Amazon, if you Google, for example, there are a lot of such books. It's called Sales Flywheel, Marketing Flywheel. They're also called inbound marketing, inbound sales too. What's this about? It's about there being no more funnel. People live with brands. People can take a very long time to make decisions. So it's a kind of cycle in which you need to constantly, regularly attract new customers and engage them in every possible way. It won't happen step by step. You rushed there, made calls, processed, sold, or threw away, or then you follow up with some mailings. No, now it's constant work on attracting an audience, engaging it, and satisfying it. Strangers become potential buyers, then customers, and then promoters. It all revolves. People recommend others, people come back repeatedly. It happens that the sales cycle, even in some very classic businesses, has lengthened significantly. That is, a person might inquire about a house, a car, or appliances. Today they interact with a salesperson but buy in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. How does the classic funnel work? You left a request for a test drive. They aggressively called you right away. Well, not like that. You're scrolling through your feed and somewhere on Facebook, they figured out that you're interested in cars. They start pushing you right away. Sign up for a test drive, sign up for this, sign up for that, ads bombard you, sign up for a test drive. You think, okay, signs of fate, I need to sign up. You sign up for a test drive, and they immediately say they'll call you back. Although they still call back the next day, 2 days later, or 3 days later. Well, anyway, they called back about the test drive. Hello, we received your application. Come on, when can we schedule you? You say, well, wait, let me think about it. That's it. If you didn't sign up, they've written you off. They've saved your contact information. Maybe they'll bombard you with remarketing later. Maybe with a reminder, occasional mailings, but they're unlikely to call. In other words, they'll write you off as trash. But since you're trash in their eyes, they figure they can still bombard you with all sorts of things. How does proper sales work? They invited you, maybe not even for a test drive, but to follow their page. You wrote something there, they responded and politely piqued your interest. And they invited you to not long, but an open dialogue. They eagerly respond to any subsequent inquiries you might have. So as a buyer, as a customer, I have several ongoing conversations with managers. I'll call them that. Sometimes it's the business owner, sometimes it's a salesperson, sometimes it's someone else. So I have correspondences with managers that have been going on for years. With some, it's been 2 years, with others, 3 years. I inquired about something at some point, then I clarified something else, then I came back, then I had an idea, and then an opportunity or need arose. And then what happens? Then I simply come and say, here's the money, give me the product. I don't need them to identify my needs, handle objections, or sell aggressively. They just need to keep in touch with me. They need to keep this flywheel spinning. Of course, from the perspective of working with an individual client, it may seem time-consuming. But it only seems that way. Modern companies, even those with very few customers, work this way too. But where there are many customers, where there are tens or hundreds of thousands of clients, this strategy is very successful, and it's reusable and continuous. Unlike the funnel, where the interaction is usually one-off, and sales occur by attracting a new audience that hasn't been processed before. This is how the most successful companies sell. That's why the flywheel is replacing the funnel. Here, by the way, are examples of books by various authors that are currently popular on Amazon. I've read marketing books, they're even named similarly, which shows how popular this concept is. In our course, we of course examine this model and various tools. I'll repeat, it works in any segment, in any industry. Business to business, business to consumer, business to government to consumer, peer to peer, for those who understand what these mean. Let's move on. Here's a good example, the company Inflow 2. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but as it happens, I've been following the project for a long time, reading posts since its inception, but recently it caught my attention once again. This startup is very promising. I think it's in the top 10 most, I could be wrong, I hope I'm not offending anyone. Like the top 10 most promising startups in New York. I believe so. It was created by guys from Ukraine and it's in the field of marketing. If you haven't heard of it, I recommend checking it out. It's very representative of current sales practices. What does it do? It's a service. Again, I might not convey its essence perfectly. I'll explain it as I understood it. It's a service for companies that are interested not in mass sales, but rather in precise targeted sales, which allows them to identify potential clients. For example, let's say I have some business-to-business product. I've developed a financial system for accounting, and I believe my system is better than competitors, DSPs, and so on. And I know that my clients are primarily financial professionals, especially from large companies, because they'll pay more. For the sake of simplicity in our discussion, let's say it's a company in New York, and they're interested in clients from New York. What does sales do in this case? We need to understand where these chief financial officers are, in which companies, and who these people are. The system allows you to do approximately the following. List potential companies based on their number of employees. For example, select 2,000 companies with more than 1,000 employees. Identify who the chief financial officer is in these companies. These days, there's so much data on the internet that it's not difficult. LinkedIn alone will provide about 70% of the data. And then you need to engage with this audience. Using the flywheel principle, in the past, these would have been one-off cold calls that would likely have yielded a conversion rate of about 1%. Unlike classic funnels, a flywheel can yield a conversion rate of, say, 10%. So what does a service like Influ do? It identifies these people and allows you to upload them into your target audience and start contacting them through available resources, such as advertising on social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on. And this service allows you to show targeted ads to these people. There are tools for this. Let me give you a simple example. You can upload a list of people with their email addresses to Facebook, and Facebook will find them in its system and show ads to these people. But it doesn't end there. This tool tracks people's reactions to the ads. So thanks to modern methods, everything is legal, open, and transparent. Thanks to cookies. Now, with modern policies like iOS 14.5, which allows users to opt out of tracking, it will probably be more difficult. I don't know how the guys will solve this, but for now, all of this is still possible. It allows you to track how many times a person visited the site, how many times they clicked on an ad, performed certain actions, and understand that someone out of these 10,000 or 2,000 chief financial officers has become ready. Someone is taking a lot of active steps. Of course, to achieve this, we show them interesting content, warm them up, and after selecting the most interested ones, we can then contact this person. Then you can make a call or contact them via email or messenger. Again, choose the right approach and make the sale. This is what modern sales are about, and it's very different from the crude, heavy-handed sales tactics of the past. Now, this is just an example of how the flywheel works. It's one of many tools, of course. There are many such tools. Modern companies. I might be revealing some secrets, of course. Modern companies use approaches such as searching for and creating lists of potential leads from open sources, from various open sources such as LinkedIn, though not just LinkedIn. They use analysis of these people and quality contact with them. So that's how it is. Okay, let's move on. Characteristics of a successful salesperson. I promised to talk about this today. If you hire the wrong salespeople, training, coaching, and supervision will be useless. And as I said, you can't turn a midget into a giant. More precisely, I quoted Google's Human Resources Director, Laszlo Bock. Therefore, hiring is the most important activity of the head of sales, or if there isn't one, of the chief executive officer. It's very simple here. However, there are no universally successful salespeople. Everything depends on the context. If you know great salespeople and you think, I will poach them now, it will not work like that. They might be great in one situation and very poor in another. You will be very lucky if they turn out to be great for you. Every company has a different sales context, and the unique strengths of a salesperson should match the company's sales context. That is, how exactly the company sells. Let us move on. How to identify a successful salesperson for your company. Here is an approach you can use. You need to take the salesperson's position and describe what happens when someone in this job, in this role, performs better than anyone else. Then identify 5 to 7 key observable outcomes indicating that someone is performing the best, and make a list of everyone in that position. And think about what the best employees did differently from the others that allowed them to achieve these results. Next, you need to ask a question. Okay, what skills, knowledge, and talents are apparently needed for this? And then the next question is whether these can be learned or if some are innate. There are people with certain abilities, personality types, and talents. If we discover that something is innate, that should be the focus in selection. while everything else can be taught. That is why the strategy of looking for salespeople from your own industry, from your own niche, especially if the industry is a narrow, small niche, is a 100% losing strategy. I mean, if you have a company selling, I do not know, fiberboard, for example, you manufacture fiberboard and sell it to furniture factories. And you say, I am looking for salespeople who know how to sell fiberboard. That is it, you have lost. There are thousands, maybe even tens of thousands, of times fewer people who know how to sell fiberboard than there are salespeople in general. You are reducing your chances of hiring a good salesperson by 10,000 times. Given that selling fiberboard is such a simple skill, I do not mean to offend anyone. It is such basic knowledge that can be learned compared to other important aspects of your industry. To bet on this, well, it is not exactly stupid, but strange. Now, continuing with the development of your salesperson profile, you can think about where to find them, although we will be talking about that too. Think about what kind of work experience and education your top performers actually had, how they developed their skills. For example, working in one company, I won't reveal its secrets, so I won't name it. Working in one of the companies. The company noticed that the best salespeople were people who had never sold before. Never. All the people who came in with sales experience were the worst salespeople. And the best salespeople in that company were those who worked in customer support. The top salespeople had previously just provided customer support, and the company focused primarily on such people. Second point. You need to think about how each top performer got into the company. This might reveal a very interesting channel that you used once but then forgot about and don't use systematically. Where did this person work before? Maybe there's a goldmine of successful salespeople where you pulled one from, and there could be many more. Wow, that's a lot. Accordingly, based on all this, consider what search sources you could apply. And then, once you've identified these sources, you can reach out and tell people from these sources about your job opening. That's how you can do it. Let's move on. Next, once you've defined the profile of your successful salesperson, you need to choose assessment tools. We'll be talking about them later in the course as well. The most effective tools are usually competency-based interviews, where the candidate's past experiences and behavior in past situations are evaluated or discussed. In this behavior, you're trying to identify these innate qualities. Next, role-playing games are also popular. For example, in the movie Wall Street, we see a classic role-playing game, Sell Me This Pen, as a test assignment. But all of this heavily depends on the sales context. That is, it's all tailored based on the specific sales environment. Next, we should evaluate candidates based on specific criteria. That is, salespeople need to be hired systematically, well, basically like all candidates. This is called a scorecard or candidate evaluation card, where all criteria are listed and we assign certain scores. The method is very popular. Again, books are written about it. A book called Top Grading was published where the author describes this technique, which he invented much earlier. It's not top grading, it's a scorecard, but if someone wants to read specifically about this, you can study the book. There are different tools. Many recruiting tools have this built in. For example, PeopleForce or human resources platforms have scorecard functionality. There are open templates available. For example, there's a template in Asana. It will be available via a link for the scorecard. There are also interview questions here that you can prepare and then evaluate, or you can do this in Google Sheets. Let's move on. Step number 4. We continue to discuss how to hire successful salespeople. It's very important not to stop at these 3 steps. When you've created your profile, selected assessment tools, and started evaluating, this is not the end. This is really great. I would say about 95% of companies don't do this. That is, they don't study their most successful salespeople to develop a profile. They don't use assessment tools. They don't use a scorecard where they record results on a 5-point scale. They don't even do that, but this next point is something almost no one does. This is analyzing your hires, drawing conclusions, and learning from them. What should be happening here? After a few months of working with employees hired using this formula, you need to analyze it and look for answers to questions. What characteristics do these top performers have in common? They're already working. We already know we're taking the best. Are these characteristics predictors, what we call success predictors in our company? Once you've realized that out of the entire scorecard, there are some characteristics that they all share, and they predict success, you should increase the importance of these characteristics in the scorecard. Next, which characteristics seem to be irrelevant, meaning they don't predict success? For example, you've seen that some people were rated higher on this characteristic, some lower, but people perform equally well. This means there's no correlation here. Here, for example, there is a correlation. Higher ratings and better actual results slightly lower ratings and slightly lower results. And here, for instance, there's no correlation. And the third question is, what's missing? Here you need to think beyond your scorecard, that is, the assessment card, and consider your best performers. Was there any other characteristic of your best employees that you noticed based on your analysis, which isn't in your applicant assessment card? If so, you need to add it. Even if you've only hired 2 or 3 people, you can already start analyzing and gaining insights. And this work needs to be done if you understand frequently, quarterly if you hire a lot, semi-annually if less often, or annually if you rarely hire. Essentially, I've referenced a book here, Work Rules by Laszlo Bock. This is how Google's hiring system is built. Laszlo Bock describes something similar. The book describes Google's recruitment process. If the company has data analysts who are familiar with regression analysis and can perform interdependency, efficiency, and evaluation analysis on interviews, calculate the correlation of indicators and results, that's really great. You'll get a nice table showing which indicators are important and which are not. This is an example of metrics analysis at HubSpot, when they compared which characteristics specifically at HubSpot predict future performance and correlate with future effectiveness, and which ones do not. Here are some examples. That is, preparation, adaptability, domain expertise, meaning product knowledge, intelligence, passion, past success. I've already named 6 top factors. These are most closely related to effectiveness, while handling objections has no correlation at all. This means you don't even need to evaluate it. The ability to persuade or push for closure isn't important for HubSpot either. Interestingly, the ability to identify needs isn't that important either. And the ability to close deals doesn't matter at all. These people, on the contrary, tend to push too hard, which negatively affects sales. That's some interesting statistics. Now, to wrap up, how have chat sales replaced phone sales? Statistics show that salespeople who are smart and helpful rather than aggressive and pushy are most successful with today's established buyers. This is important. In other words, the current universal profile of a salesperson has changed. The growing popularity of the internet has led to a shift in power from the seller to the buyer. With this shift in power, buyers will no longer tolerate being pressured into making a purchase. That's why overly aggressive sellers will face a huge number of abandoned orders that never make it to payment. Modern buyers will respond to salespeople who are helpful, smart, and respectful of their needs. And very often, if you analyze your daily communication, your interaction with your social circle, you will likely find that nowadays, if we are not considering your work, but rather your everyday life, today, you probably communicate more in chats than on the phone or in person. You probably have a friend chat where you post funny pictures, write congratulations, comments, and discuss plans. There is a chat, I do not know, for parents, kids, in kindergarten, in school. A chat for residents of your building, a chat for owners of a certain car brand. What other chats are there? And so on. Professional chat. Generally speaking, we are starting to communicate more in chats than in other ways, like on the phone or in person. And sales. That is, it is much more familiar and natural for us to discuss many things in a chat than on the phone. And when a phone call ends from a sales perspective, it is over, as if the connection is cut off in most cases. Which is not the case with chat, right? A person can be in the bathroom at 1 a.m. watching some random video blog and suddenly remember, oh, I was interested in a car from the USA, go to the chat and write to that manager they were talking to. Hey, listen, can you remind me please how much it costs to import a car from the USA? The likelihood of this happening is much higher than someone calling at 2 a.m. after watching another car review. To a phone number they definitely did not save, saying, oh, remember, you called me 2 months ago. I left an inquiry. Can you remind me how much it costs to import a car from the USA? I mean, nobody would do that. So the chances of that happening are, I do not know, probably millions of times lower than sending a message like this. It is much easier to leave a trace of yourself in a messenger, and for a person to later search through the history to find the conversation with the seller. Here is an example. Today I needed to connect to the internet. That is it. I do not even remember my service provider who is supposed to connect me. I do not remember anything. I just type internet in the chat history, find a conversation where the word internet appears, and I see, oh, here's where I was chatting, this is the person, and then I contact that person. So I don't Google, search, or call through a messenger. So that's how we move forward. So it's worth ending with a book recommendation. There were several interesting books mentioned today. Of course, I recommend that people in sales study all the books in this presentation. And to wrap up, we talked a little bit about hiring today. The hiring system was really well described by the author of the book, Who? It's actually a great fortune that this book has been translated into Russian. Books like this usually aren't translated right away. It often takes about 5 years before they reach us in Russian. But this one was translated even though it was published. Well, it'll probably be 5 years soon. It's still very relevant, really great, and top companies recommend it. Now, homework for those already in the course. Create a profile of your sales player. Here are all these instructions you had once again. Just follow them to do it. Few movies for inspiration, and this, by the way, is also a book. Well, of course, even though the sales are a bit different there, some things will be similar. We'll see these analogies. There you have it. This concludes our introductory and open session on sales. I hope you found it interesting. I invite everyone to take this course. The course is modern, technological, and innovative. I think it's about 90% different from any other sales course. If you're ready to sell the way it will be done, some are already doing it now. Some have been doing it this way for 10 years now, while others will do it in the future. But everyone will definitely do it this way eventually. If you're interested in this, if you want to, you're more than welcome to join this course. That's all for now, friends. A big thank you to everyone who watched online. For those who watched on Facebook, you can like and share. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel to receive updates here. That's all. Have a good evening. Bye-bye. See you soon.